Hello students, this is Mr. Damiani and we are looking at page 707 in the chapter 13 workbook. We are going to be looking at lesson 13.1 today. The topic for today's lesson is patterns in data. So chapter 12, we worked a lot on organizing data and finding centers of measure and that type of stuff, but today we're going to look at how data kind of forms a pattern, how it's spread out over the course of an interval. The essential question: how can you describe overall patterns in a data set? Our connection is going to be seeing data sets in graphs such as dot plots and histograms can help you find and understand patterns in that data. So the dot plots and histograms, two things we worked on in chapter 12. Let's take a look at the unlock the problem here. Please follow along while I read, starting here. Many lakes and ponds contain freshwater fish species such as bass, pike, bluegill, and trout. Jacob and his friends went fishing at a nearby lake. The dot plot shows the sizes of the fish that the friends caught. The lengths are rounded to the nearest inch. What patterns do you see in the data? All right, so we have our dot plot here. The title is The Fish Caught. The number line right here actually represents the length of each fish, and then the dots would be the number of fish that were caught. Okay, so let's take a look at how you're going to actually describe this data. Here it says circle, we're just underneath that picture of the northern pike there. It says circle any spaces with no data. So if you take a look here, you'll notice that there were no fish caught for 8, 9, or 10 inches. All right. Place a box around any groups of data. All right, so if I'm going to look at how this data is kind of grouped, I'm going to box in that set of data, and I'm going to box in this set of data. All right, so we have seen, we're looking at some clusters and we're looking at some gaps. Let's start answering some questions. First up, a gap is an interval that contains no data. Does the dot plot contain any gaps? If so, where? Well, does the dot plot contain any gaps? Did we circle any points without data? Yes, we did. And where is that gap formed? Well, that gap is formed from 8 to 10. All right. So there were no fish from 8 to 10 inches long, and there were two clusters. Oh, sorry, let's not get to that. That's a review here. Let's go back up to this point here. A cluster is a group of data points that lie within a small interval. So here we're looking for kind of how that data is clustered or clumped together. There is a cluster from 5 to 7. That was the first box that we completed. And another cluster from 11 to 14. All right. So if we're going to summarize it, there were no fish from 8 to 10 inches long, and there were two clusters of fish measuring from 5 to 7 inches and from 11 to 14 inches long. All right, so when you're looking at a dot plot, you want to kind of look at that data, look at for gaps and clusters, two key vocabulary terms that we're going to be working with. Let's go ahead and scroll down here. Let's summarize the information shown in the dot plot. All right, so think about how, think about what we just described up above in this section here. Try to summarize it in your own words. If you got to pause the video, please go ahead. All right, so I went ahead and summarized in my words here, and just kind of see if you match up hitting on the big points here. The dot plot shows that they caught fish that were 5 to 7 inches long and 11 to 14 inches. They didn't catch any fish that were 8 to 10 inches long. Okay. All right, I'd like you to go ahead now and turn the page to page 708. Now we're going to look at another piece of data here, and we first focused on the dot plot. Now we're going to look at how we can analyze a histogram. Okay. You can also analyze patterns in data that are displayed in histograms. Some data sets have symmetry about a peak, while others do not. All right, so let's look at how this data is dispersed. Erica made this histogram to show the weights of the pumpkins grown at her father's farm in October. What patterns do you see in the data? All right, so we have our histogram here, pumpkins weights. We have the number of pumpkins grown here and the amount that they weighed here on the bottom. We have our intervals all set up. So let's look at step one. Identify any peaks in the data. So is there one point in the data, or there could be more than one peak, where it seems just to be high above the rest? In this case, the histogram does have one peak. The interval representing the greatest number of pumpkins is for the weights between 21 and 30 pounds. Okay, and that would be the peak right here at 200. Step two, describe how the data changes across the intervals. All right, so as we look at it, scroll down so I got a little more space here. The number of pumpkins increases from 0 to 30 pounds. That's going in this direction here. It's definitely increasing. And what is it doing from 31 to 50? You are correct. It is decreasing. All right, so just what we've identified. We've identified a peak in the data. We've tried to look at how it's dispersed across intervals. How is it increasing and decreasing? And then the third step is going to be symmetry. So describe any symmetry the graph has. All right, so if I draw a vertical line through the interval 21 to 30, so right here, do I have symmetry? Does it look like it could fold over on that line? And in this case, it does. So therefore, it will have symmetry. So describe any symmetry in the graph, or that the graph has. If I draw the vertical line through the interval 21 to 30, the left and the right sides of the histogram are very close. Now, just look at this, very close. Does not have to be exact, it just has to be close to being mirror images. So the histogram has line symmetry. Okay. So the data values increase to one peak in the intervals for 21 to 30 pounds and then decreases. The data set has line symmetry about the peak. All right, so if you take a peek at, take a peek. If you take a look at what we've focused on here, for that histogram, we identified any peaks. We looked for increasing or decreasing. We looked for symmetry. These are the things that we focused on with histograms. With the dot plot, we looked for gaps, clusters. One way to describe data on a dot plot. All right, so you want to think about what we focused on with these questions and how we describe the data. So let's turn, please. And you'll notice that we have a dot plot here for questions 1, 2, and 3, and we have a histogram down here for question 4. So what I would like you to do is I'm going to have you go ahead and pause that video, and I'd like you to go ahead and answer questions 1, 2, and 3 and see if it matches up with mine. Thank you. All right, go ahead and compare what you got with what I got here. There was a gap from 5 to 6. There is a cluster from 1 to 4, and the students displayed 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 paintings in the art show, with most students displaying 1. That was your mode, and no students displayed 5 or 6. 5 or 6, so that was our gap. Go ahead and pause again real quick and try to look at the histogram here, trying to identify any peaks You can identify any gaps and then any type of symmetry or how it's increasing or decreasing, just to give you a few reminders there. So pause the video, please, and start breaking that down. All right, so go ahead and take a look at what I filled in there. We had two gaps here, two peaks here. So here's a peak and here's a peak. We also have a decreasing trend from 0 to 29 and an increasing trend from 40 to 69. There was a gap here with no data, 30 to 39, and if I put my symmetry there and folded it, we would have symmetry. So that is the information I focused on with the histogram. All right, thanks for taking the time to watch the video today, folks, and we will get together in class over the next couple days, and we'll take care of 13.1. Remember to write a good summary focusing on, how to describe a line plot and how to describe a histogram. Hit on all those key pieces of information, and then form a good question for your group, or form a question that maybe you're still something you're still unsure of, but go to the flip chart to get that done. All right. Hope everyone has a great evening. Goodbye.